Hi folks, and welcome to today's video, which is a comparison of the Chongker kitten that I unboxed yesterday with my Metacat and with a Posable artist made kitten. And if after watching this video you decide to purchase one of these products, I would be much obliged if you use the link below, as it helps the channel. So first of all, I'm going to compare my Metacat with the new kitten that I unboxed yesterday. So obviously the big difference between Metacat and the kitten that I bought yesterday is that Metacat is interactive. However, the life-size cats that Chongker make, that are purely plush cats, look exactly the same as my Metacat. It's just that Metacat has robotics added to it by the collaboration with Elephant Robotics. So I thought that Metacat is still useful to compare, as the actual plush side is made by Chongker, so the same company that makes the kitten, and I can still compare things like the size and the plush details. So the first thing I'd like to compare with these two cats is the faces. One thing that I felt let the kitten down yesterday when I was talking about its details was the nose. I think you can see there that the Metacat's nose is much more realistic and I think much nicer than the nose that they've given the kitten. It looks like the two noses are actually exactly the same size and are from the same mould. But the colouring on the Metacat's nose is much nicer than on the kitten's nose. The kitten's nose looks much more artificial, which is a little odd, because as they buy the same company, you would think they would just use the same standard nose. Can't understand why they've gone for this sort of colouring on this one and the lack of sort of any shading. Don't really understand that. I think it would have looked better with the same nose that the Metacat has got. And the next thing I'm going to compare is the eyes. The Metacat seems to have sort of beige coloured eyes and very large black pupils, which is probably to do with the fact that it's got LCDs behind it, so maybe that's been a factor with the very large black pupils. I think the kitten's eyes is one of the very strong points. It's got very beautiful eyes and they're quite clearly cats, as the pupil is more oval shaped rather than round as a cat's is. I love the way they've got the colour, sort of diffuse blue colour around it. It's not just solid. They're really pretty and attractive. Funny enough, I got a comment from someone who said that they got this same kitten, but it didn't have the same realistic eyes. So I'd be really interested to hear from that person when they got this kitten, because I'm wondering if they've maybe changed the eyes recently. So next I'm going to talk about the ears. The ears are really, I would say, the same. The kitten's ears are slightly smaller, which you would expect because it's a smaller model. They're of the shape where they're sort of more pricked up on the top of the head, but the material of it and the colouring is, I would say, pretty much the same, as is these tufts. They've sewn in tufts the same as they did on the Metacat, but you can see there that the ears are much smaller, as you would expect, because it's a smaller model. And then the colouring is the same shade. They've used the same shade of paint for colouring around the top of the head, and that again is very similar. The muzzle is quite a bit smaller, as you would expect, because again the kitten is a smaller model. The nose on the kitten is disproportionately big to the muzzle. The fur around the kitten's head is considerably shorter than on the Metacat. It's been trimmed all the way around here and it's quite short under the chin, whereas on the Metacat it's been left long, especially under the chin here. And that's because for the rest of the body, Chongker have used a short pile on the kitten, whereas they've used a very long pile on the Metacat. And the tails are very different because with the Metacat they've used a different coloured fur. They haven't used white fur and then used paint to colour it. They've used actual brown fur. Whereas with the kitten, they've used the same short pile white fur, but then coloured it with paint, like they have coloured the white fur on the face and the ears. In terms of the size of the two cats, you can see there how much bigger Metacat is to the kitten. And looking at the paw pads, you can see that they've used exactly the same silicone pads on Metacat and the kitten, though on the kitten they've put the toe pad slightly further away from the main paw pad and made the whole back foot larger. And unlike the Metacat, the paws on the kitten don't have any detail, but that's because the arms and the front paws are very small, so they would have to make a different size silicone pad. So I think that's why I've not put silicone paw pads on the front paws. And the last big difference between these two cats is that the Metacat doesn't have any joints at all and no armature, whereas the kitten has a joint for the head, joints for the legs at the top, an armature in the arms and an armature in the tail. So that concludes my comparison of the Metacat and the Chongker kitten. So in the rest of the video, I'm going to compare the Chongker kitten with an artist-made kitten. So an obvious difference between these two kittens is that the one on the right is made in a realistic style, whereas the Chongker kitten is more stylized, so it's in a semi-realistic style, but it's still made more as a doll, so it's made to stand up in a sort of human way. But I still thought it would be interesting to compare these two kittens, because whilst the artist-made one is made in a realistic style, it is possible to get artist-made animals that are semi-realistic like this kitten and have a more doll-shaped body that you can dress in clothes. And I thought it would be really interesting to compare these two kittens because they're both handmade, they both have a plastic skeleton so that you can pose them, they both have paw details, and they are both made from white plush which is then painted. So as with the comparison I did with the Metacat, I'm going to start by comparing the faces on these two kittens. And again, I'll start with the nose. So as I've already said earlier in this video, I think this nose lets this kitten down a bit. So I think I might either paint this nose or make a whole new nose altogether. This kitten has got an absolutely tiny nose that appears to have been handmade out of polymer clay, which the artist has then painted. So obviously a lot more work involved and skill in making that. And looking at the eyes now, we've already looked at these blue eyes on the Chongker kitten, and they are really lovely. But the eyes on the artist-made kitten are more realistic. For a start, the shape of the eyes is not a simple round shape. It's actually a proper eye shape. And they've even managed to get the look of sort of skin around the eye, which is quite amazing. It's difficult to see on the screen, but these eyes have got very large black pupils, and then you've got a beautiful sort of slate grey colour around the outside. You can't really see on the screen, unfortunately. So again, the eyes on the Artist Made kitten are more realistic and look like it's taken more time, work and skill in order to getting them looking the way they do. And looking at the ears, we've already looked at the ears on this kitten, painted on the back. The tufts at the front, just like the Metacat. These kittens' ears are really, again, very tiny. They aren't just fur material either. It looks like they've got some other kind of material sewn inside that makes them a little bit more substantial. The artist has given them little bits of fluff in the same way as they have on the Chongker kitten. And again, the back of the ears is painted, but the painting on the backs of this cat's ears is more dense, and it's a different shade to the rest of the grey on the back of the kitten's head. So again, you've got more skill and time that's gone into this one, because they've got lots of different colours of paint that they've skillfully applied to put the colour on the back of those ears, and also all the painting of the different colours around the kitten's face. There are lots of different shades there, and it's been really skillfully applied. Whereas the paint on the Chongker kitten looks pretty much all the same shade. They've just applied it in sort of different thicknesses, but it looks like all the same sort of brown shade. We've already looked at the muzzle on the Chongker kitten. As I said before, the nose is sort of disproportionately big for the muzzle, whereas on this kitten I think they've got the proportions more realistic for the muzzle. The whiskers on this kitten are extraordinarily fine, whereas the whiskers on the Chongker kitten are a lot thicker and straight, so they're not as realistic. Both kittens have got paw details. Got the silicone paw pads on the Chongker kitten, whereas the Artist Made kitten, the paw pads are made of polymer clay, and that polymer clay has been painted, so the sort of shading on the polymer clay. However, I do like the feel of the silicone on the Chongker kitten rather than the hard polymer clay of the Artist Made kitten. And the last thing I'll look at is the posability. So this kitten moves its head in one axis, whereas this kitten, its head can move in many axes. They both have an armature in the front legs, though funny enough, the armature in the Chongker kitten actually seems smoother than the armature in the Artist Made kitten. The back legs are jointed in this kitten, but this kitten has a full armature, so the legs and feet are completely posable. Both kittens have a full armature in the tail, but the Artist Made kitten also has a full skeleton in the body, so that you can pose it in many different ways. So overall, the Artist Made kitten is more realistic. It's obviously taken more skill to make it, and it's more posable. However, you are paying a lot of money for that. There's a big difference between $420 for this kitten, and I think the price might have actually gone up since I bought that kitten, and $69, which is what you'll currently pay for this kitten. I think it's really nice that Chongker are producing something that's semi-realistic and it's quite posable, but it's much more affordable for people who haven't got the money to spend on a very expensive Artist Made kitten. So folks, I hope you found that useful and entertaining. Thanks for watching as always, and see you next time.